Hello everyone. Well, we are back. I have the dentist shortly, so I've got what they call, I think it's called a hard out. Is that the expression when I've got to leave at a certain time? But right now we are going to be doing a little recording session, responding thing. Oh wow, I haven't done this in 2 weeks and suddenly I'm all over the place. So of course, 2 weeks ago before I went off to Cornwall was nice, by the way. Thanks for asking. I finished up a response series to a response made to me. That was a 2.5 video. This video is gratifyingly just a little over 3/4 of an hour long, and it is what do the trans community need most right now? Abigail Thorne and Freddie McConnell from Pod Save the UK, hosted by one Nish Kumar. I will say, by the way, this was actually quite exciting. So I do a poll, of course, and it makes sense. This is a little bonus feature for my patrons. It makes sense to ask my patrons what they want to see. A little poll to ask my patrons, what do you want to see? And it was actually quite exciting watching this poll because the front runner changed, which I kind of didn't really think would happen. I always sort of thought, well, most of my fans, supporters are probably going to have similar preferences. But basically, there was a video called "The Cass Report is Anti-Science" by Rebecca Watson, and that was at the front. And I was surprised because I thought you guys were really going to want me to respond to a Philosophy Tube video. I thought that me dunking on Philosophy Tube was your favourite thing. Maybe some people weren't feeling that because I recently did a video responding to Philosophy Tube. I don't know. But what I will say is that Philosophy Tube video eventually pulled out in front. So I was like, oh, that's exciting. A change. Indeed, actually, the top 3 results are all pretty close. There we go. Exciting. I'll probably make sure to include those 2 quite high scoring options in the next poll after I can finish this little series, video, whatever. There we go. It will probably be a series of videos. I think it will take at least 2 parts. It might take 3 parts. We'll see. If a lot of it's just casually talking, maybe we'll make some good progress. But of course, we're not going to make any good progress unless we actually jump into it. So let me just check that we're actually recording everywhere we need to be recording. Okay, and let's go.
Last week, the government announced new draft guidance for schools in England and Wales to not teach about, and I quote, the concept of gender identity.
I cover this on my channel.
To explain what gender identity refers to, that's the personal sense of how we define our own gender. For some of us, that corresponds.
I hate how they say, like, to explain it, and then they just say the personal sense of how we define our own gender. Because, well, what is gender? Right? Like, obviously, like, that's such a non-explanation. It's almost hilarious to be like, here is blah, blah, blah identity. To explain what blah, blah, blah identity is, it's the sense we have of our own blah, blah, blah. Like, you've not defined anything there. It's like, yeah, I know what an identity is. The question is, what exactly do you mean by gender? Do you mean traditional stereotypes? Do you mean the categories of man and woman? And if you do mean the categories of man and woman, well, what do you think the categories of man and woman should be taken as referring to? It's not an explanation.
To the sex assigned at birth, and for others, it's something else. So essentially, regardless...
And there it says, does it line up with your sex assigned at birth? So that just adds like an extra layer of confusion. So what is gender and how does it relate to your sex at birth? Is gender traditional stereotypes, in which case you are saying that there are traditional stereotypes that correspond to your biological sex? And if you are saying that, are you saying that it corresponds objectively or just in terms of how one personally thinks about it? But the other thing is, this of course relates to the categories of man and woman. When people talk about gender identity, it's whether you're a trans woman, a cis woman, and so on and so forth. So you're basically therefore arguing that the relationship between your biological sex and whether you conform to traditional stereotypes is what makes you a man or a woman. These are issues that are just glossed over by the fact these people don't bother to define what they're actually talking about. I will be drinking my smoothie, of course.
Clear that gender ideology is a contested subject. That's her phrases, not ours. The document asks that schools do not use any materials that present those, quote, contested views as fact, and that includes the view that gender is a spectrum.
I mean, it is contested. Like, obviously it's contested. I'm contesting it right now, and there are many people who think what I'm saying is quite reasonable. Yeah, of course it's contested.
There is an example.
Especially in contrast to like other things people are taught in school. What are you taught in school? Mathematics. There are complete fringe lunatics who maybe, I don't know, deny like certain mathematical ideas like Pythagoras or like deny like rational numbers and things like that. In terms of history, yeah, I don't know, maybe there are some people who think that the Battle of Hastings in 1066 didn't really happen and it was just made up somehow or whatever. Like maybe there are people who deny obvious facts of history, but those people are very fringe, and there is also concrete, hard evidence to go against those people. And this is true for pretty much everything you learn in school that is presented as fact. I mean, obviously there's like art and, English literature and things like that where facts don't really enter into it because it's more about subjective topics. But as far as objective facts go, everything in science, everything in maths, everything in history and geography is not at all contended by anyone. And I mean, then if you want to move specifically to sex education, of course, what people are taught in sex education is stuff that is universally agreed by everyone, except for the moralistic stuff, which, okay, yeah, obviously that's going to be contended. And, you kind of get into a question of what exactly do we want the government to be doing in terms of the morals they should foster. There are probably a lot of people who maybe think the government should move in a direction of encouraging more abstinence and less kind of exploration of sexuality and things like that. That's all moralistic. The thing about gender identity is that it's not saying it's okay to explore your gender expression, which, I recognize that might be contested, but I think that is a legitimate thing for the government to say. It's a question of a claim about reality, that people have gender identities and these gender identities determine whether you are a man or a woman or something in between and beyond.
Out of step with the country on this issue. A recent poll from YouGov suggests that 60% of Britons think that
Okay, let's see.
schools should teach people that people can be non-binary or identify as a gender other than male or female.
66%. So 34% disagree. And you're going to say that's not contested. I think it's reasonable to say that, again, I realize like there's, kind of conspiracy theories and things like that are becoming more popular. And I'm not going to suggest that every single thing that's believed by 34% of the population must necessarily be completely legitimate. But I certainly think it's reasonable to say that schools should not be teaching as fact that which is disagreed with by 34% of the population. And by the way, notice that what they said specifically was should teach about the idea that somebody can be non-binary. Wait, let me get the exact wording there because I want to
teach people. A recent poll from YouGov suggests that 60% of Britons think that schools should teach people that people can be. From YouGov suggests that 60% of Britons.
Sorry, 60%, not 66. Have I got something in my teeth? Yeah, I do. So not even a super majority there, just 60%. And sorry, actually, I need to get the exact wording of what they believe. So that's the first thing. 60%, just 60% of people agree with this. And then
country on this issue. A recent
like out of step with the country, 60%. So stupid.
Poll from YouGov suggests that 60% of Britons think that schools should teach people that people can be non-binary or identify as a gender other than male or female.
Okay, so should teach people that people can be non-binary. That's different. I was wondering whether it was just teach people about the idea, which obviously would be different. But okay, that's fine. But still, 60%, not a massive number at all. Of course, if 60% of people believe one thing and 40% believe the other, then that's contested. Bear in mind, like, I don't know, like, I'm just going to guess that Nish Kumar is like an annoying liberal. He's probably one of those people who felt like the Brexit referendum shouldn't count because only 52% of people voted for it. And it's like, well, 52% and versus 48%, that's basically split down the middle. So there, he clearly doesn't, or like he thinks the fact that it's contested probably really matters, and is like freaking out about the fact that Brexit happened because 52% of people voted for it. But then when 60% of people think something, he's like, oh, I can't believe the government would say this is contested. They're so out of step with the British people.
How can it be that you can talk about people who have undergone gender reassignment surgery, as rightly you should, but you can't talk about any of their journey before that?
Yeah.
And
Sorry, it's not about like you can't talk about their journey before that. First of all, you can talk about the fact that people might feel this way. I mean, again, the question is, why would you? But you just can't teach that this is an actual thing that can happen, that your gender identity, which again, I guess is taken to mean the reality of you actually being a man or woman, or at least there's a close connection between those two things. You can't teach that, which of course you shouldn't, because that would be a very sexist, gender essentialist idea to teach people, that whether they're a man or woman is based on their feelings, or that their feelings could be relevant to that. But you can teach about the gender before. The obvious reason why you can teach about sex reassignment surgery, as it's often called, is that that is a material thing that happens, and it's an option available to people. And of course, I think I'm right in saying they certainly haven't explicitly ruled out the fact you can teach about varying gender expression. And of course, I mean, they've already said that you can teach about different sexuality, so you can teach about gay relationships. In fact, you have to teach about gay relationships at secondary school level. So obviously, sexuality is very much related to gender expression, in that it's the idea that if you're a man, you like women, or if you're a boy, you like girls, to put it in a term which I guess would make more sense for teaching about school-age children. That is a gendered expectation. You're a boy, you like girls, and obviously, you know, if you're a boy who likes boys, you're going against that. So they're clearly already willing to teach that people can, in terms of material reality, in terms of their actions, go beyond the traditional gendered expectations of boy or girl. What they're against is this immaterial, and hence heavily contested, idea that there is such a thing as gender identity in your head, which changes regardless of the physical world around you.
When you start thinking like that, you can't help but think of Section 28, right? Which was the...
I've already done a whole video where I compared it to Section 28. I'd recommend you check it out if you haven't already. It's not one of my most viewed videos, so there's a possibility some of you haven't seen it, but you can find it pretty easily on my channel, I think, by just searching for Section 28. It's also one of my more recent videos, so you could just find it that way.
You know, I mean, we've got lots of people talking to kids. They were talking about you can have 72 different gender identities, or very young kids being exposed to things which clearly aren't appropriate. Now, I don't remember that.
Just obviously, like, the number of genders is not the key point, and that's not the problem.
Being an issue when I was younger, but clearly that is now an increasing concern.
It's important to note that this 72 genders is a very specific number that's being trotted out.
Yeah, but the specificness of it is not what matters, so I don't know why they're focusing on this at all. It literally says here in like the chapter section, debunking the claim of 72 genders. Apparently going to spend 6 minutes just on this, and it's like, does it really matter?
Andrew Pierce raised the number on Good Morning Britain, but where is the evidence that this is being taught to kids? Here is Gillian Keegan.
I don't get it, because why is this guy quibbling the specific number when presumably he would not have a problem with teaching kids that, right? Like, he believes in gender identity, he presumably believes in the idea of being non-binary. I guess maybe the only problem he'd have with it is that 72 is a specific number, and he thinks that there should be such a nebulous conception of gender that in fact you could say there are infinite numbers of genders. But it's kind of like he's disputing this as if the specific number of 72 matters, or as if, for example, there is some more reasonable number it could be from his perspective. It's like, well, presumably he doesn't think that, or again, the most reasonable number I guess he thinks it should be would be infinite. I know infinity is technically not a number, because it seems like if he's signing off on trans ideology, which he seems to be, he would think that any kind of meaningful, substantial conception of what gender means is inherently bigoted.
We've received evidence with those slides to say that they've been taught in classrooms.
That was absolute soup.
Yeah, no, I know.
It was.
Well, to be fair, like, what did you think she's going to do? Like, I would not be surprised if there is somewhere a presentation slide that mentions 72 genders. I mean, I don't know where this number 72 has come from, but obviously, again, it's not surprising that she's not providing the evidence here, because again, the evidence for that specific number does not matter. I mean, I'm sympathetic to Gillian there, education secretary, because I'm somebody who often sort of thinks that the idea of needing specific evidence for specific claims is usually just a pointless annoyance, because most of the time, especially around this topic, we can argue using logic and common sense and also our general observations about being in society. If I make a specific claim about something happening relating to gender ideology, the specifics of that claim and evidence for that specific claim a lot of the time doesn't matter, because the key point is that we all know that this nonsense in general is being spread, and whether the specifics of that general nonsense always line up with what's being said, it really isn't that important, because again, the specifics don't matter. Has she seen a slideshow from a presentation shown in school mentioning 72 genders? Yeah, probably, or else why would she mention it? Is she going to what do they think she's going to do there? He's like, that was absolute soup. She didn't answer the question. Like, have like a little placard or something with the slide blown up, printed out to be like, here it is. No, it would be weird for her to do that, especially considering it doesn't matter that she does that.
Soup. She was just saying gender identity is gender identity is gender identity is 72 genders.
You really want to go down like the people talking about gender identity in a circular way and that being a bad thing. That's what you're going to say. That's going to be your big criticism. Because you're the people who are like, a woman is someone who identifies as a woman, who identifies as a woman, who identifies as a woman. You've really got to think through the criticisms you're making, because you might end up looking like a massive hypocrite moron.
Jokes about this community, and there's a huge number of bad stand-ups doing jokes about how, I identify as a chair, or I identify as...
So I pointed this out before. I genuinely agree that a lot of the comedy around this is very bad and very lazy. And my criticism is that I think that trans identity is so obviously nonsense. Like, as a comedian, one of the things you would obviously want to avoid is being reductive. And it's kind of the risk with observational comedy in general, isn't it? That you basically might just point out things that happen. And like, yeah, I've heard of that. And of course, when something's happening that is just inherently funny, like the whole trans ideology thing, it's going to be especially tempting for people to point that out. But I will say, I've not really seen that much comedy about the trans ideology thing that has made me laugh coming from a critical perspective. Again, because I think it's too easy to point out it's stupid, which makes it not actually that funny. Because you're like, well, yeah, okay, I already know that. Like, someone comes up like Ricky Gervais, you got these new women now with penises. Yeah, okay, I already knew that was hilarious. I knew about it. I already knew it was funny. What are you as a comedian adding to it? And by contrast, Nick Mullen did like a stand-up special called, I think it was called The Year of the Dragon, and he has some like skits on there, or like riffs, I guess, about the whole trans thing.
Conservatives are boycotting Target because of something called tuck-friendly bathing suits. Did you see that they're mad at tuck-friendly bathing suits? And that kind of shocked me, because I'm like, what the fuck is a tuck-friendly bathing suit? Like, do I just have the smallest dick in the entire world? That I can't imagine I would have a problem hiding my penis in a regular women's bathing. I've never looked at a woman's bathing suit and been like, yeah, no chance, dude, no way. Yeah, not gonna happen. And then apparently they're for children also. I can understand why they're mad. If I was in Target and I heard a lady being like, excuse me, my son's dick is too big for the bathing suit. I'd be like, I'm never coming back to this fucking store again.
And I think some of that was funny. But the thing is, again, that wasn't coming from the perspective of, let's make fun of how stupid trans identity is. That's not what he was doing, because again, that's too easy. It's too boring. I mean, I don't know if that's his reason, but that's why, to me, that's not funny. And it's much funnier to make slightly more intelligent jokes that make you think. Yeah, I sign off on this idea that most comedians making jokes about trans identity right now are really not being that funny.
Because, there was a lot of comedy in the United Kingdom and around the world that was very regressive and trades in unpleasant stereotypes. And I thought that we were trying to push comedy in a direction that moved.
Oh, unpleasant stereotypes. And you're saying that we should push against unpleasant stereotypes by embracing trans identity? I think you might be a bit confused.
Moved beyond that. And, these aren't marginalized voices. These aren't fringe figures. These are arguably the two most successful and powerful stand-ups in the world who are using the global platform given to them by their Netflix specials.
Well, the funny thing there is, like, again, you need a big platform. Like, actually, somebody having a big platform and using it to criticize trans identity is kind of heroic. I mean, it's definitely true that was heroic of J.K. Rowling to do. She could have been universally loved, except for some people who, like, people were making fun of aspects of the kind of like Harry Potter thing and like her things of that and like all the weird kind of lore stuff she was adding. There were like things people were making fun of her for. And I mean, from my perspective, as someone who's not really a liberal, like the worst things about J.K. Rowling were all evident before she became gender critical. And when she became gender critical, I was like, oh, actually, she's kind of based. So, yeah, definitely there were criticisms of her beforehand. But the thing that has destroyed her reputation, or at least made her more controversial, as opposed to being pretty much universally loved, has been her coming out and taking a stand on this. And that was something she was able to do because she's quite well off, because she's quite powerful. So even though she has been, I think, knocked down in terms of prestige and, kind of in broad terms power by the massive pushback she's got for this, she was able to take that hit. Whereas if you're a poorer woman who talks about the stuff, you just have the police showing up on your doorstep. So, yeah, I think it is good that there are these powerful people out there who are willing to make a stand about this kind of stuff.
I can't understand the logic of why they're doing it.
These people, yeah, they sorry, I think I clicked. Oh, yeah, you can see it. Okay. I'm just doing something really quick. These people, like, they're always telling themselves, because that's something they say all the time. They say, I can't understand it. And it's like, well, usually shouldn't the attitude be that if you can't understand something, you do sort of admit that maybe you could learn about it. Like that's, and like there are people who said this, to go back to J.K. Rowling. There are people who will genuinely say, I can't understand why J.K. Rowling has done this. I can't make it make sense, blah, blah, blah. But things, obviously they've not tried to understand it, because if they did, they would kind of find out like the reasons why she's done it are actually pretty evident. So these people saying they can't understand it, it's really bizarre to me. And I would say generally speaking, saying you can't understand a position is rarely like a flex. Like, I feel like some people say it as if like the implication is because they can't understand it, obviously it must be a completely nonsense course of action. Whereas that's generally not true. Now, in some sense, I could say I can't understand why people affirm trans identity, but I think for the most part, I pretty much do. I just think the reasons aren't very favorable. I think for the most part, it's a matter of equivocation. I think like that's the main reason why people affirm trans identity, because they think that affirming trans identity is the same thing as affirming the validity of gender nonconformity. And I think part of it is just, well, it's the fact that a lot of people do just go with what the majority of society says. And right now, the majority of society, I mean, as Nish Kumar said, 60%, wow. But certainly even more of the kind of elite establishment is saying that trans identity is valid.
It's a sad fact of the media that quite often communities that are spoken about are very rarely heard from themselves. That's something we aim to fix on this podcast, whether we're talking to people who have experienced the COVID inquiry or we're talking to care leavers.
So here's the question. Are they going to include lots of gender critical people on there, right? Because they're talking about gender critical people, but have they heard from any gender critical people? I don't know. Like, that's the thing. I'm just going to go out on a limb here and guess that these people like to spend a lot of time complaining about certain groups and not featuring those groups on their show. I'm just going to guess that's quite likely.
The YouTube channel Philosophy Tube, and Freddie McConnell, a writer and journalist.
Before we have a conversation about what we're here to talk,
It is, okay, so like I'm assuming that one of these people is a trans-identified male and the other one's a trans-identified female. It is kind of funny that you can see, like, I mean, look, I'm not saying it's impossible for a biological male, and, you know, maybe this person is actually biologically male and non-binary. I don't think it's impossible this person could be biologically male. Obviously, I know that Philosophy Tube is biologically male, but it is funny, like, the difference in their body types, and quite a stark contrast. Again, not to say the fact there is that difference between their body types should be taken as proving why one of them can't be a woman and the other one can't be a man. Obviously, it would be possible that a biological female might be especially tall and kind of, you know, broad, and a biological male might be especially slender. And in that case, they would be still a woman and a man because of the reality of their biological sex. But obviously, in this case, we know that their biological sex does not line up with what they claim to be, and it's also very evident, I think, what their biological sex is. Again, I might be embarrassing myself. Maybe that particularly small, petite-looking individual at the back is, in fact, biologically male and just especially small. We'll see.
Abigail, you are the first person who has been in Star Wars who has appeared on Podsafe the UK.
Oh.
This is a huge moment for me personally.
It's not really Star Wars, though, is it? It's not. I mean, I haven't seen The Acolyte. I've heard bad things about it. In general, I mean, obviously, with Disney, there's loads of crap coming out. But yeah, it's not really Star Wars. Like, The Acolyte Star Wars TV show.
Did you get a lightsaber?
I can't tell you that.
Are you
I can't.
NDA'd on the lightsaber?
I can't tell you anything about my character.
I don't know why I find that funny just because the lightsaber's phallic. Like that's the new way of like being kind of inappropriately invasive in asking questions about like a trans-identified male in terms of like surgery. Like, so, did you get a lightsaber?
It was really nice and I had a great time.
Were you a Star Wars fan before?
I was, yeah. I've actually been...
You know what I find weird about this? Like, we've already established from Philosophy Tube's interview with Ash Sakar that Philosophy Tube tends to avoid... Like, remember the whole video was PT saying, I can't talk about that. I'm just an actress. I don't really talk about this stuff. I don't make suggestions, blah, blah, which was hilarious and weird and strange. And I don't know. I'd recommend if you haven't seen that, you can check out. I did a little highlights thing of it. I think I called it Philosophy Tube is devoid of thoughts and insight, something like that, because it was genuinely just Philosophy Tube saying like, I don't have an opinion on that. I don't really have anything to say about that, blah, blah, blah. Just, it was bizarre considering what Philosophy Tube does on YouTube. But yeah, considering that, I'm wondering what's going to happen here. Like, is Philosophy Tube going to continue to say, I don't have any thoughts or opinions on that? In which case, this will be pretty insubstantial.
I've tried, my kids aren't really quite there yet. We've tried The Mandalorian, but that was definitely just for my benefit.
Yeah, I know lots of people who have been...
You've got to be a complete psychopath to be like, yeah, my kids aren't really into Star Wars, but I tried to introduce them to it. We watched The Mandalorian. Like, what do you want about? Like, why is that what you would introduce them to instead of the iconic original series that actually is good and introduced it to the world? I don't know, that's like, I just get the concern that we're gonna like hear like, yeah, my kids, they're not that into Disney movies. I tried to show them the 2019 Lion King remake. It's like, what are you doing? Like, these are the people who are responsible for the fact that these companies keep pushing out new crap. Because I guess some people are like, well, that's obviously the new, more legitimate version because it's updated or whatever. No, stick with the classics.
That's used to describe, and this is their language, the sense of unease between one's biological sex and gender identity. I know, Abigail, you've spoken.
Yeah, it's gonna get controversial.
I'm gonna get in, like, just even the way that they have reified the concept of biological sex.
I can't believe that the National Service, the Health Service, had the audacity to reify the concept of biological sex, because that's what did it. That's what reified it, not the billions of years. Not billions, because I don't think. But hundreds of millions of years of sexual reproduction between males and females, one organised around facilitating the function of the small gamete in sexual reproduction, the other organised around facilitating the function of the large gamete in sexual reproduction. Not the fact that Philosophy Tube is from a lineage of organisms, of ancestors throughout history, every single one being either a male pairing up with a female or a female pairing up with a male and reproducing. That's not what reified biological sex. It was the NHS.
As if like that's an objective fact that's like discovered and not something which is assigned. Like a lot of
Again, the thing about this is this only makes sense in the sense that you could say everything is assigned rather than discovered. Like the rocks, planets, space, energy, electrons, protons, neutrons, all those things are assigned in that we look at reality and we seek to accurately describe reality and we invent categorizations to help us do that. But that is not the same thing. And it's very disingenuous to just say it's assigned as if it's not clearly describing reality, because it's not the same thing as constructs that are invented entirely beyond reality and basically do actually come into existence by dint of having been invented. Like, for example, gender. You know, we invented the ideas of masculinity and femininity, and in inventing those ideas, they came into existence. That's not the case with biological sex. So yeah, I'm sure Philosophy Tube is the kind of postmodern person who maybe would actually be willing to sign off on the idea that everything is a social construct and nothing is actually real. But if that's the case, it's incredibly dishonest to say like, to specifically point out biological sex. Sorry, I knocked my microphone. Specifically point out biological sex as something that's been invented and constructed when, again, according to Philosophy Tube, everything has.
A lot of people are still like, oh, like, well, you can't change sex, but you can change it. It's like, no, actually, clearly you can.
Yeah.
I have.
Okay. Massive contradiction, right? Philosophy Tube is claiming that sex is socially constructed, meaning there is no objective reality to biological sex, right? And yet has then just said, clearly, you can change biological sex. So which is it? Is biological sex a social construct that's not describing any actual reality, and as such we can't make clear definitive claims about it? Or is biological sex something that you can, in reality, objectively change according to having changed certain signifiers of your, physiology?
I believe that putting a clinical label on it, as the NHS does, but only when trans people have it, is basically a way of saying this is the thing that trans people have, and this is the thing that justifies us taking control of their bodies away from them.
Okay, look, I'm not even going to engage in most of that because, I'll let most of the other trans people who get annoyed by that talk about that. Now, the one thing I will say, of course, is that gender dysphoria, I pointed this out before, I responded to a whole video that Philosophy Tube made about gender dysphoria, but pointing out that gender dysphoria is not just something that trans-identified people can have is a massive point in favor of the gender critical movement, because of course, we think that somebody can have gender dysphoria and not be trans because they might recognize that having certain feelings, negative anxieties about the reality of their biological sex does not mean that they can say that they are in fact not a man or a woman in keeping with the reality of their biological sex. So I could have gender dysphoria. I could strongly feel like I hate being biologically male, but I don't have to be trans based on that, because being trans would mean I'd then say, because I have these negative feelings about being biologically male, I am therefore a woman. And yeah, I agree that that's nonsense. So if Philosophy Tube wants to say we shouldn't treat gender dysphoria as if it's a thing that basically only trans people have and all trans people have, I absolutely agree. Because we should acknowledge, first of all, that you can have gender dysphoria and not decide to deny biological reality, but also you can be someone who denies biological reality without even the excuse of having gender dysphoria. And of course, there are many people like that who, for kind of cynical reasons, decide that they are, in fact, not what they obviously are.
You say like useful, and I think the question is in quotes, useful to who? And the answer,
I think the question is useful to whom?
it's been very useful to the medical establishment who do not allow us to control our own bodies. But
I genuinely don't know what you mean, don't allow you to control your own bodies. Like, the only thing... You can do anything with your own body, except unless you're talking about stuff that requires the medical establishment to do things to you, in which case the medical establishment is like, they have the Hippocratic Oath, right? Like, I 100% sign off on doctors not being obligated, like basically not being at the beck and call of every single person. Like, yeah, you know, everyone should have a right to control their own bodies, but you shouldn't say that because, I don't know, I want a particular form of plastic surgery, therefore the doctor should just agree to do it for me. That's not how it works.
And estimates from March of this year suggest that it would take 10 years to clear the backlog.
Those numbers are really shocking, aren't
that's
they?
an underreport. I was told 26.
Really?
If you sort of
See, that genuinely makes no sense to me. Because it's like, how can, there must, like, that's one of those statistics where your brain should say, that can't be true. I mean, I don't know what's going on there. But, like, first of all, it's weird because we all know the many stories about people who get absolutely rushed through the gender identity transition kind of situation. So we all know about that. That's the thing. I feel like it must be that there must be something in there that's really skewing the average somehow. Because I mean, I remember I actually got referred for counselling for anxiety through the NHS, and that was considered non-urgent, and that took over a year, which felt like a long time, but it didn't take. Did he say the average was like 5 years, 7 years? I can't remember exactly what he said. And obviously then 26 years apparently to completely work their way through, I guess, the current waiting list or something. Yeah, I don't know. I just can't believe that.
I mean, it just means that you cannot get on with your life. In very broad terms, I suppose that's
Sometimes
how it felt
literally.
for me. Yeah, sometimes literally in terms of not being able to leave the house and...
No, philosophy. This guy didn't pick it up. Philosophy tube meant because of, you know, being unalive. But yeah, saying like you can't get on with your life, it's a very defeatist mentality, isn't it? And I think this is the problem, because with mental health issues, obviously, and this is pretty much, I've already made a video on mental health. I feel like I keep referring to other videos I've made, but it's because I think obviously I've stated these ideas to my own satisfaction in other videos, and yeah. But basically, I've said before in that video on mental health that I absolutely do think that we need to recognize that there is a point at which things should be taken seriously medically, and it shouldn't be 100% about kind of mentally, almost like in terms of your happiness and anxiety, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. I know it's obviously usually used to refer to, economics, like working hard, but in a sense I just mean kind of getting over it, whatever, putting on a happy face, blah blah. Like obviously it can't be all about that, but I think it has to be to some extent about that, because otherwise you're just not going to be, well, like I said, you're not going to be able to live your life. And the response there is not to just sit there and mope and say, oh, I can't live my life. The response there, again, you have to, I know there's the whole like Jordan Peterson thing about like, if you're in a destitute situation, a horrible situation, you should hope, I don't think Jordan Peterson invented this idea, but I just remember hearing it from him. You should hope that it is on some level your fault, because if it is your fault, there's something you can do about it. And there is kind of freedom in recognizing something as your fault. You have to have that mentality to some extent. Everyone has to have that mentality to some extent. And nobody can say, well, because of these factors beyond my control, I can't continue living my life. Like, nobody should be allowed to have that mentality. If someone has that mentality, they need to be called out because it's the only thing that's going to be good for them long term.
It's not like you're waiting and everyone's saying, oh, God, it must be so hard and, oh, we're doing everything we can. You know, you're waiting and you know that it's for political reasons. And that is not only sort of very depressing, but incredibly angering. And, you know,
I genuinely, I don't understand people saying, you know, oh, you're waiting for political reasons. There was recently, I think it was the manifesto put out by the Lib Dems in anticipation of the forthcoming election. And they mentioned something about increasing cancer survival rates by 10% by reducing, I'm not going to remember the exact thing, but it was something like reducing, it doesn't really matter the exact statistics, so I'll just, you know, again, I know this will freak out Nish Kumar because he'll be like, 72, blah, blah. But again, the exact statistics don't matter here, but something like, I know the 10% thing. 10% thing's definitely true, he said. The manifesto said increasing cancer survival rates by 10% by decreasing the wait time for starting treatment for cancer from 18 weeks to 10 weeks. I don't know exactly how they're planning to do that. I mean, again, it's irrelevant. They're not going to get into government anyway. But there we go. So right now in the UK, again, I'm the weeks here I'm not completely certain on, but in the UK right now, if you have cancer, you can have to wait up to 18 weeks until you start treatment, which is insane. And one of the questions asked in a debate between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer was, if you had a loved one who was seriously ill, would you do private treatment? And Rishi Sunak said yes. And it's yeah, I mean, honestly, if you have the means, again, I mean, I don't love the NHS because I feel again, I've heard that other countries like Germany have a better system that is affordable for everyone, but is actually more efficient and delivers better results. So I'm not one of those people who's praises the NHS on kind of as idol worship or whatever, such that it would impede people actually improving it. But I do think really that all healthcare, I mean, when I go to the dentist, once I've done recording this, I'm going to have to pay for it, which is lame. And that's why we all have terrible teeth in the UK. But yeah, I do think, considering the fact 18 weeks, you've got cancer, and you have to wait again. I'm saying 18 weeks to stress, again, it might not be 18 weeks. It could be more. It could be slightly less. But the point is that is an insane number of weeks to wait. That is months to wait. What? That's over 4 months. That's 4.5 months to sit there knowing you have cancer and knowing that the hospital can cure cancer, or, they can treat cancer, but you just have to wait. And everyone talks about, America and how healthcare costs money there. And yeah, it's absolutely insane that somebody in America might have cancer, which could be cured, and they can't get it cured because they don't have the money for it. That's bad. But it's not much better to say that in the UK there are people who have cancer and that could be cured, but we don't have the resources that we can cure it quick enough. Basically, we have a backlog of people waiting for treatment. That's insane. And again, apparently decreasing it to, again, the exact number doesn't matter, but it was some amount the Lib Dems wanted to decrease it by, I'm going to say 10 weeks, which is still over 2 months, would increase cancer survival rates by 10%. That's 10% fewer people each year dying from treatable cancer. So when you consider that and you wrap your mind around that, you realize how absolutely absurd it is for somebody to claim that the high waiting lists for biological males, perfectly healthy biological males, to get their penis turned inside out, that the waiting list for that is kind of long, and to say, well, this is all about the culture war issue. Really? Is it a bit, so 18 weeks, or again, whatever, a significant delay to starting treatment for cancer, which, if reduced by a significant amount could increase cancer survival rates by 10%. Like, do you think that's political? Or do you just have to recognize that right now, for a variety of reasons, our country's really gone down the tubes and lots of things that should be being sorted out just aren't being sorted out?
Saying that the NHS has failed to provide gender-affirming care in a timely manner, and this has contributed to the deaths of patients. And all the while, the NHS managers who've been
again, to mention the deaths, and it's like, there are so many other deaths happening due to massive NHS delays. Deaths for people who are actually ill. Deaths of people who actually have something wrong with their body that needs to be cured. And you're saying, oh, you know, the actual casualties are these biological males who, you know, want this surgery, which is completely unnecessary and even actually has negative side effects and will increase the burden they will put on the NHS long term.
told since at least 2013 in multiple reports and consultations and reviews that they need to desegregate the system and implement an informed consent system which would save money and lives and eliminate
See, Philosophy Tube has never explained what an informed consent system is.
the waiting list. All the while, the managers who've deliberately chosen not to do that are not only still walking free, but still being paid.
You mentioned the word
Not only still walking free. Is the implication there that Philosophy Tube thinks these people should be arrested and put in prison? Because that is... I mean, look, if you really want to get serious, you could argue that a lot of the people in charge of like government and in charge of society right now should be put in prison for a lot of the things that they do wrong. But based on the fact that Philosophy Tube is specifically talking about like this issue, and these people are obviously working within a much larger system where there are huge constraints in terms of what can be done medically, it is really messed up to be saying these people, who are probably often working quite hard and like actually genuinely trying to fix the problem, because there will be people lower down the rungs who are trying to fix the problem, especially in the NHS. I think people who do get into the NHS are probably for the most part doing, I mean, it's not, again, wages are being cut, it's not particularly glamorous as a profession. They're probably doing it with the intention of helping people as much as they can. To say those people should be arrested is crazy.
Segregate there. What would that look like?
It would look like us getting the same healthcare that cis people get, the same way that cis people get it. So right
Okay, but you want different stuff, so okay, whatever.
now, if a cisgender woman goes through menopause and experiences anxiety and depression and goes to her doctor and says, hey, I want hormone replacement therapy, I want some estrogen, she can get it from her GP. If a trans woman experiences the same states of mind and goes to the same doctor and requests the same medication, she has to go to a segregated gender identity clinic with a 10 or 26-year wait, be diagnosed with this thing, gender dysphoria, and jump through all the hoops before she can get the exact same medicine from that GP. That's what we mean by segregation, and that's what we should be eliminating.
Again, the issue is it's pretty obvious. You are acting as if you're talking about something that's very specific to biological sex hormones, and you're acting as if it's unreasonable that there is a different standard for how this should be treated depending on your biological sex.
Just over a month ago, the Royal College of GP hosted a conference of conversion therapists. They were warned that that was what it was, and they did it anyway. When I was investigating why the NHS is the way it is, when they...
I love that, like being like the conversion therapists, they were warned that's what they were. Like, hey, we're going to host a bunch of people who think that maybe through like therapy, we can stop people having these negative feelings about themselves, about having to fundamentally change their body in a way that will cause long-term negative side effects. Hey, did you know those people are conversion therapists? We've warned you. Like, oh no, what a disaster. These people who actually want to help have been called a word that you think is bad. Terrible.
Outburst on the subject and the treatment of people.
You know what, I'm thinking about like that whole thing about like a woman going through menopause and like that being compared with a trans-identified male. I'm just thinking about myself, like the big difference here is that a biological female who's feeling depressed because of a hormonal imbalance can claim she is genuinely feeling depressed because of a hormonal imbalance, because how her hormones should be is with, you know, some reasonable amounts of estrogen. And that's healthy for a biological female. A biological male can't claim that he's feeling depressed because of a hormone imbalance. And by the way, if a biological male is feeling depressed because of a hormone imbalance, that's fine. And if it were shown that in some way, like giving the biological male estrogen would treat the hormonal imbalance, I'd be fine with that. The point is that gender dysphoria is not depression caused by a hormonal imbalance. It's depression caused by a hatred of what your body has naturally developed into. So of course, those two things, like I was just like thinking about it, I was like, it really is such a ridiculous comparison. And the more I was thinking about it just then, I was like, it just makes no sense at all. Like, yes, biological females, because like part of it is I was like thinking to myself, like, we're just not going to get an explanation of what an informed consent system means. I can pretty much guarantee that. And I was thinking to myself, like, I guess it literally does just mean that a trans-identified male rocks up, says, yo, give me some estrogen, you know, yeah, I know what it means, sure, yeah, just give it to me. And then, like, that's it. Like, if Philosophy Tube is claiming this can cut waiting times, presumably the only way it can do that is by getting rid of all the, safe checks and whatever to make sure that somebody's actually fully cognizant of the implication of this, and that, you know, it is basically an action of last resort. And of course, you know, the thing with a hormonal imbalance for a biological female going through menopause is that the doctor can very reasonably say, and again, I think this is something that should also be investigated, like we should investigate the causes of mental health issues. And to be honest, yeah, if doctors are just saying, oh, you're depressed, have some estrogen, that's pretty stupid for a biological female. But I would presume what they really actually do, because I assume this is an easy thing to test, is they test the hormonal levels, saying, well, the hormones seem a little bit out of whack. That's probably why you're depressed. So yeah, of course, we'll give you hormones. That's the obvious treatment for the problem. The same way, you know, if you were spending all your days inside and you found out you were depressed, well, you look at what's the thing about you that obviously could seem like it's causing depression. And the answer is, well, you probably want to go outside for a jog, or, you know, a cycle ride or something. That's probably going to be healthy for you. You look at what the most obvious cause for the depression is, and you treat that. So in the case of a woman who's got a hormonal imbalance, give her the hormones. The point is this: if you did that same test on a biological male with gender dysphoria, you're not going to find a hormonal imbalance, and certainly probably not one that would be treated with estrogen. Again, if that's what you found, sure, why not? But what you're instead probably going to find is a lot of negative mental health feelings about the reality of that biological male's biological sex. So, again, it's just such a non-comparison.
Partly these problems predate the Conservative government by quite a long way, and have actually been present in the NHS for a long time. I mean, it's not really that long ago that the NHS was openly practicing conversion therapy instead of, as I believe they're doing now, covertly practicing it in many cases.
This seems like a really pointless point to make, because the NHS has been around since 1940s. Obviously, 1940s trans identity barely even existed. I just think like being like, well, the NHS has been like this for a while. It's like, well, trans identity as it's currently conceived of has been around for little more than a decade. And yeah, it just seems a bit weird to be like, you know, this has been around. This has been a problem for a long time. And it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense from your perspective, because a lot of what you're advocating for is a new development. Of course, this stuff wasn't really in keeping with what you would have expected before.
They really do believe that they have the moral authority to decide for a trans person when, how, and whether we may transition. I think a lot of them really do believe that, no, it's morally okay for them to decide that for us. And that, I think, is the key cognitive shift that we need to be making.
I think the key cognitive shift that Philosophy Tube needs to be making is understanding that professionals, considering that maybe there needs to be a progression of treatment where you start with one thing and you kind of advance slowly towards more extreme treatments, is good. It's a fine system to have. And basically, no, yeah, it is legitimate. Like, I mean, I don't know if it's subconscious. I think it's reasonable. It could be conscious, because I think it's a very reasonable thing for them to think. What they're basically thinking there is, we should have the ability, we should be the safeguards against people getting treatment they don't really need and they won't really benefit from prematurely. A fly just landed in a spider's web and a spider just caught it. That was actually quite satisfying to watch. I've got a spider's web outside my, on my window, and I just saw a fly land, and, Spider's got it. Good job. Right.
Within
All right. I think we're going to end there. We'll see how this ends up when I edit it down. I feel like we've made pretty good progress, like 20 minutes, and I'm reasonably thinking, basically at this point, I feel like it's more likely we'll finish this in 2 parts instead of 3, because, at this current rate, if we get through the same amount of content next time, we'll be over 40 minutes done and we'll only have 8 minutes left. I think I'll probably just try to push right on through to that final 8 minutes, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of back and forth and stuff that we can skip. I did actually struggle to find my camera before I start recording, so I lost about 10 minutes from the amount of time I'd usually spend recording. We'll see how long this ends up being once I've edited it down. I did actually enjoy this response. I felt like there was a lot I had to say, but I felt like there were a lot of opportunities. That's something I always think when I'm done with the response. I think, do I feel like there was a lot of opportunities to explore some interesting ideas? I do think there was, so I hope you enjoyed this. And yeah, stick around for part 2. And thank you all for watching. I will see you next week.